Hi, PerspectiveWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday, November 2nd. A very windy and cold day to start the new work week in the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S. to Great Lakes region. This cold air outbreak also has some lake effect snows with it. Snow bands driving to the southeast from the northwest, just downstream of the still relatively warm lakes, Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, Lake Erie. All of these areas are seeing some snow streams this morning oriented northwest to the southeast with that wind flow. The wind flow is really throughout the atmosphere, the low and middle and upper parts of the atmosphere. We're seeing northwest winds, and they will gust at the surface all the way up to 50 miles per hour in parts of the northeast U.S., and that could cause some power outages. We do still have many leaves on the trees, and that kind of increases the chances for some limbs to come down with these very gusty winds. Notice even in central Pennsylvania mountains there are some now some snow showers showing up, and outside chances some of these flurries make it all the way east of the Appalachian Mountains into the northwestern suburbs of the big cities along the I-95 corridor, but for the most part they'll remain upstream across central New York, central Pennsylvania. But again, a lake effect snow situation setting up here as we begin the new work week. Temperatures well below normal for this time of the year, and high temperatures confined to the 40s in many areas in the DC, Philadelphia, New York City corridor, and much colder wind chill values as well, with those northwest winds again gusting up to 45 or 50 miles per hour. Well, while we experience some much below normal temperatures in the northeast U.S., tropical activity continues at this late date in the Atlantic Basin. In fact, we have a hurricane, Hurricane Ada, that intensified over the last 48 hours or so, now has maximum sustained winds of 90 miles per hour or so. And we'll kind of focus in on the tropical activity over the next several minutes, because I believe the pattern is unfolding that will present another tropical threat to the U.S. Most likely next week into the following week, let's say day 7 to day 14, the threat to the U.S. will exist, I believe. We have a very strong and large area of high pressure that will set up across the northeastern part of the nation, the southeastern part of Canada. Always a favorable situation this time of the year for some tropical activity to cut underneath that ridge into the Gulf region or the southeastern part of the U.S. It may very well be this system right here. It's a difficult forecast. What it looks like will happen with Ada is it'll continue on a course to the west into Central America. This is Nicaragua right here, this is Honduras, and this is Belize. It looks like this system will impact directly Nicaragua and then start kind of curving to the west, northwest across Honduras, and then Belize maybe in its pathway as well. And then it'll probably meander back out over the extreme western or northwestern part of the Caribbean Sea. And that poses a problem because, again, the upper air pattern that's unfolding could certainly feature this system then spilling out over into the Gulf of Mexico and perhaps impacting Florida, or perhaps the other areas in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, anywhere really from the southeast U.S. coast across Florida into the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. I believe this area right here has another tropical system to deal with. Probably next week into the following week is the timetable. Even if this system were to, let's say, move a little farther to the west in Central America and die out over that land mass, the atmosphere is so favorable that another tropical system would likely form in the western part of the Caribbean Sea. So whether or not it's Ada or the remains of Ada that has an impact here in a week or two, a little too early to say, but even if it isn't Ada, another system would likely form, because the upper air pattern is very conducive to tropical development over the next week to two in this part of the Atlantic Basin, and that threat continues as well into the Gulf of Mexico region. This is the latest official storm track as depicted, as predicted by the NOAA's National Hurricane Center. Again, maximum sustained winds right now of 90 miles per hour. Not out of the question that Eta continues to intensify before it makes landfall, maybe even reaching major hurricane Category 3 status before impacting directly Nicaragua. Again, it'll kind of cut across Nicaragua into Honduras and then start to turn to the north into Belize. And at that point, it may then meander back out over the northwestern Gulf of Mexico and ultimately could then spill out over into the Florida Straits or the southeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. And for this particular area, southern Florida, I think the threat timetable is next week into the following week. Let's say day 7 to day 14, right in this region right here. So even though the calendar has turned to November, we're not done with the tropical threats in the Gulf region or the rest of the eastern seaboard of the U.S. Now, what do I mean by the pattern is unfolding into one that's favorable for tropical activity in the southeastern part of the nation? Well, I always like to look at the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern. This is from the ensemble run of the GFS last night at 6C, and watch what happens with this high pressure ridging here. This is the average over the current 5-day period, days 1 to 5. As we move forward here into days 3 to 10, we're talking November 4th to November 9th, and even out into this time period, days 4 to 8. This is now extending well into next week. The high pressure ridging really intensifies in a location here over the southeastern part of Canada, the northeastern part of U.S., that allows for tropical activity to cut underneath the ridge into the Florida Straits, the Gulf of Mexico, and you can even see a little reflection of a potential tropical system here in the upper air at days 4 to 8. So this evolving pattern with respect to high pressure ridging is something I always fear this time of the year, because it allows for tropical activity to form and to impact Florida, other parts of the Gulf of Mexico, or the southeastern U.S. Again, watch it. We'll be monitoring closely this developing high pressure ridging at the 500 millibar level over the southeastern part of Canada in coming days, and it continues beyond that, days 5 to 9 and days 6 to 10, just centered right there in kind of a dangerous area for potential tropical activity right in this area right here. And again, the timetable for potential impact in the U.S. from a tropical system next week into the following week, roughly day 7 to day 14 is the timetable here. And it could be what remains of Eta, or if not Eta, another system is liable to form in the northwestern part of the Caribbean. Well, let's now walk through the surface forecast maps from last night's 6E operational run of the GFS. And look at this isobar pattern right here. You have a strong low, 982 millibar low over the Canadian Maritime Province region, and strong high pressure out over the middle part of the nation, the southern part of Missouri, 1035 millibar high. The difference in pressure between this high pressure and low pressure is quite dramatic, and that's why you see all these black lines here that represent isobars, lines of equal pressure, a tight pressure gradient. Winds generally flow somewhat parallel to the isobars, in this particular case clockwise around highs, counterclockwise around lows, and that is promoting a strong northwest flow of air right in this area right here, the Mid-Atlantic region, the northeast U.S. Again, gusts up to 50 miles per hour, not only today but into tonight as well. There certainly can be some power outages. All this blue represents lake effect snow. The Great Lakes are still relatively warm this time of the year, and with this cold air moving above the still relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes, that helps to create some buoyancy and in response some snow shower activity, especially just downstream of those lakes. Don't be surprised if some snow flurries make it all the way east of the Appalachian Mountains into the northwestern suburbs of the I-95 corridor region. But for the most part, they'll hang in central and western PA and upstate New York. Again, a lake effect type of snow pattern throughout the day here. Now, things calm down quite a bit. This is now the forecast map for tomorrow morning, Still windy as we begin the day across New England, but those winds will tend to die down. Cold start to the day for sure on Tuesday, but then by the afternoon, winds die down completely, and it becomes a relatively mild day compared to what we'll experience today in the northeast U.S. No wind chills to deal with tomorrow afternoon. High temperatures confined to the 40s today, much lower wind chills, the 50s on Tuesday afternoon. And then really the rest of the week looks relatively mild in the much of the eastern third of the nation, and then by the time we get into the end of the week, you start to see a reflection down here in the northwestern Gulf of Mexico from last night's operational run of the GFS. Right here, this is now the Friday morning forecast map, and whether this is Eta or another system that forms in the northwestern Gulf, a little too early to say, but the pattern is very favorable for some tropical storm activity right in this region right here. And again, it could spill out over into the Florida Straits region by the latter part of the weekend or the early part of next week. And this is the area of concern for next week into the following week. So again, even though the calendar has now turned to November, I don't think we're done with the tropical threat in the Gulf region, especially Florida, or the southeastern part of the U.S. Again, we're talking latter part of the weekend or next week into the following week. It looks like roughly 1 to 2 weeks out. They very well may have to deal with a system near Florida, and it very well could be a hurricane, maybe even up to a major hurricane status at some point over the next 5 to 10 days or so. So something to closely monitor. Meanwhile, a very windy and cold start to the new week up across the northeastern part of the nation. That's it for now for PerspectiveWeather.com. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.